Well, okay. It's still till now. Let's get started. We have over 30 attendees already. I'm sure the number is going to soar up. So, hello everyone. Welcome to Ask Seminar series. I'm John. I will be moderating the seminar together with our communication manager, Kathy Medley. Also joining us is our director, Nas Peter, and he will be introducing the speaker. Just so you know, this seminar is being recorded and we will post the recording on our YouTube channel. And after the presentation, we will have the short Q&A session. So please feel free to bring up any questions you may have. We encourage you to speak out. If you don't have a mic, you can also chat us your questions. And that's pretty much the housekeeping thing. So before the speaker gets started, I will hand the ball over to our director, Nas Peter. So Nas Peter, please go ahead.
Thanks very much, John. And hello, everybody, and welcome to today's ESSEC seminar. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce Bernadette Placky, today's seminar speaker. Bernadette works for Climate Central, where she's the VP for Engagement and the Chief Meteorologist. Climate Central is a nonprofit working in the climate space. It's a bit of an unusual presentation and unusual speaker, which I think is very, very good. Bernadette has a long list of accolades and sits on very many important boards, and she's an AMS fellow. It's not that unusual for us to have an AMS fellow speak to us. It is very unusual, I think. It may be a first, actually, to have an Emmy winner speak to us. Bernadette is a former TV meteorologist, and she won an Emmy for that. And she's on the AMS Council and on many important boards, including for the National Academy of Sciences and Engineering. So Bernadette is a former TV meteorologist, and she's going to talk to us today about something that I think is extremely important for us, because we are frankly not very good at it. Us in the climate science community. It's about how to communicate climate science, and I don't want to sort of guess at what Bernadette is going to talk to us about, but I'm hoping that there might be something about how to talk about climate science to people who really, really, really do not believe in climate science. But that's enough for me. Over to you, Bernadette. I look forward to this. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for all of you joining us today. Yes, when I spent the majority of my broadcast time, it was in Maryland at Baltimore. So not the DC side, but the Baltimore side. So I am a big fan of the state of Maryland. We're going to get into Climate Matters. This is going to be a case study of the program that we lead here at Climate Central, and really bridging that gap between science over to communication and storytelling, because it is so critical. We know so much about science, but unless we bring this in accessible ways to people to help them understand, we're going to lose a lot of our foundation to move forward on things we know we need to move forward on. So let's get going here. Let me start clicking. There we go. Okay, quick summary of my background. I went to Penn State for meteorology. First half of my career was operational forecasting, most of it in television. That was a picture from Sandy as it was passing by. And then to the right is the second half of my career. I've spent at Climate Central 12 years now, where we are a nonprofit research and communication organization really focused on climate science for communication and understanding and decision-making purposes. So the first thing I want to get into, because it is the golden rule of all communication, is knowing your audience. And we're going to talk about a case study of how we've approached climate science in an accessible communication form, but you can't really do communication until you know who you're talking to. This is the thing that often gets misunderstood. Even in communication circles, people forget to ask, who's my audience? What does it mean? And so I really want to ground this entire conversation in understanding where Americans are on the topic of climate change. So many of you probably have already seen this, but it's good research to bring back. This is from our good friends at Yale and George Mason University, who have done the climate change of the American mind. research 2 times a year going back to 2008. So it's really foundational science on people's views of climate change. And honestly, in all the misinformation we're experiencing in this world, to me, this is the biggest piece of misinformation going on around climate change right now. We think people don't care about this, but they actually do. And if you take this, and I'm going to go through a few examples of this, and you approach all your communication from this foundation rather than a space of fear, it's going to be a different conversation. It's going to be a different form of communication. It's going to be a different way you get into it. So here's how America breaks down into 6 different categories when it comes to climate change. Now, on the left, you have the alarmed and the concerned. On the right, the dismissive. And you see that alarmed and concerned are well over 50%, almost 60% of society. They're not all activated in the same way, and sometimes they don't know what to do. Then those middle bubbles, cautious to doubtful, these are the groups that this is not a priority, but they're not going to shut you down if you start a conversation or if you bring climate change to them in a way that they can understand. They may be grumpy about it, but they are not going to come at you with the hatred, right? Now, on the right, this is the dismissive. It is only 10% of our population. It has such an outsized voice, and it has some positions of power right now too. But it's only 10% of our population. If you focus all of your conversations and all of your communication around climate change on that group, you've missed 90% of society who genuinely is concerned and has questions. And you all are in a prime place to help them understand what's going on and what that means for them, because that's what they want to know. What does this mean to me? What does this mean to my family, to my community? What can I do about it? So let's break this down in categories across the US. And in this research, if you go to the Yale Climate Opinion Maps, they've taken it, they've downscaled it to all these categories you see in these buckets right here, from national, states, congressional districts, all the way down to counties. Also, if you click on this toggle here, there are about 30 different questions. And you can then look across the US where people are on these various questions when it comes to climate change. Here's the most basic, right? That think global warming is happening. When you get to the right there, that's the scale. When they're in the yellows or above, that's over 50%. When you start to get into the blues, that's below 50%. Now look back at the map. There are very few counties across the entire United States that are below 50%. And in fact, as a whole, 72% of society thinks something is happening. Now, if you go to other countries, these numbers are in the 80s, 90s, upper 90s. So we still have a ways to go. But the thing is, people know something's happening. Now, you start to lose some of these numbers when it comes to human caused and human activities leading to current warming that we're seeing. And there's a lot more blue. The national average is 59%, but there's a lot more blue across the map. So here's a place where we have some work to do, because it's not to cause blame, but when people can understand there's a human component to the warming we're experiencing, we can guide them to that place of humans being the solution too. This is always a really interesting one that I see here, this next one. Sorry, I'm a little bit of a lag. Here we go. Okay. That scientists think global warming is happening. Now, this is really funny, right? This is intentional, right? There have been multi-million-dollar misinformation campaigns for this result, but more people think global warming is happening than think scientists even think it's happening. So there's an area where we can easily make up some of that gap if we approach it from that area of, yes, I'm a scientist, because so many of you on this are. It's a unique opportunity for you to be able to have those conversations in a very different way and help people understand, yes, we know. Okay, couple more questions. Gotta love some of these that come when you start tapping through all the questions. Support funding for renewable energy sources. Here's a conversation starter. People across the US love renewable energy. There's a lot of oranges and reds there. Look at this one. Support providing tax rebates to purchase energy efficient vehicles and solar panels. Now, this survey was done in November 2024. It was after the election. I know lots happened since then, but look at this. 75% still support that. Here's another one. Carbon dioxide being regulated as a pollutant. We always hear anti-regulation, correct? However, 74% of society across the United States wants to support this being regulated as a pollutant. On top of that, this is one that always I love to show, because to me, this is where we have a prime opportunity, because people know something's happening, right? But 77% of society says adults, percent of adults who somewhat or strongly agree that schools should teach about the causes, the consequences, and potential solutions. And that is across the US. And that's an area where we're hearing a lot of pushback is in schools, in what we read and how we approach academics. But 77% support this. And what this is telling us is we know something's happening, but we don't know what. We don't know what can be done, and we want to learn. But then look at this. If this is really the biggest challenge we're facing, or one of the biggest challenges we're facing, and 77% of people want to learn about it, over 70% are concerned about this, but only 36% even occasionally are talking about global warming or climate change. This is our problem. Communication is a solution, and we have not unlocked it in the right ways. And one of the big reasons for that is it's intentional to sow doubt and allow that 10% to drive the narratives and the conversations that are happening around the country, whereas 90% are open to those conversations. So let's get going into this case study, Climate Matters. Now, when I was on air, I came over to Climate Central for this program, and Claudia, who's here, has been a partner in this work the whole time too. She's been really a guiding star for me when it comes to science, so thank you. The reason Climate Matters started, it is a reporting resource program, and it started with TV meteorologists and a National Science Foundation grant. And the reason this came about was, again, George Mason and Ed Maybeck, again, another partner in this work, did research on who's trusted as far as it comes to climate change. And toward the top were TV meteorologists. And the reasons for that is not only trusted, people are coming back to them regularly. They have large and dedicated audiences. They are scientists for the most part. They are skilled communicators. And extreme weather is how so many of us are experiencing this climate that is changing. Plus, there's an opportunity here. The public is looking for answers. Now, we know, just in all transparency here, that TV is shifting dramatically in how we're receiving information is, but TV meteorologists have really been on the front lines of the shift to social media, all forms of digital, so they are still carrying a strong, trusted space within communities. And it all started with this guy. The first National Science Foundation grant was with Jim Gandy and his newsroom in Columbia, South Carolina. And as Jim explains this, I wasn't just in a red state, I was in a dark maroon state. But what we showed over the course of a year of him bringing in only about 12 or 13 segments of climate connected to weather that people were experiencing in Columbia, South Carolina, we found with social science and survey work done pre and post, that his audience was interested, they learned, and they spiked on several different metrics when it comes to concern and curiosity about climate change. And this is all published research. And this is his news director, Mary Beth Jacoby. What she said was, our audience can feel what's going on. It's happening right outside. Now we can help them understand it. That's what we're supposed to do, inform our community. So at the time, only 54% of TV meteorologists were even convinced that the climate was changing. That was lower than society at the time. So it took some work to not only break down barriers and listen and connect with this community. What are the questions? Where are people getting confused? Where are they getting stopped up with things? And then over the next couple of years, some serious work and working with this community, we were able to bring that number up to 95%. So it's a really dramatic transformation in the TV meteorology community over not that long of a time. And in the process, they started to become the forefront of climate communication. And for those who are interested, you can dig a little deeper into this research. We have a few different papers. So I'll just pause on this for a moment if you want to take a screenshot or write it down, but we will share slides. Localized climate reporting by TV weathercasters. This was a public impact assessment that we did with So the second one was a broader public impact that really used climate change to the American Mind data, overlaid it where we were getting use of TV meteorologists incorporating climate reporting. And we saw, again, these spikes of interest on several different metrics when it came to their understanding of climate change, their concern, their understanding that scientists know this is happening. The top one was done with two distinct groups, one in Miami and one in Chicago, and it was a dial testing research. And the Miami version was with our partner, John Morales, and he did it in English and in Spanish. And then with our friend Tammy Souza in Chicago at the time, she's Philadelphia now. And again, same thing. As these meteorologists brought climate segments into their weathercasts in ways that mattered and resonated with their audiences, people learned and were interested. And then fast forward, Ed Magbach put this in a really interesting, I think, paper that I'd love for any of you who are curious to take and read about how we can really advance climate action through supporting communities of practice. And there's so many really interesting groups there who are trusted messengers for society where we can work with them to help them understand how climate change is affecting the things that they care about and the people that they connect with and support them in their communication in this work. So then one more paper here just to put up for you too, a nature commentary by Ed and several of us, really reflecting on 10 years of this program when it was up and running and understanding again that assessment of how we've been able to advance public understanding on several metrics with this. And I pulled this quote specifically. Now, again, know your audience, I wouldn't use this specific quote to the public, but in an academic setting, this works. So effectively communicating the risks of climate change is essential for advancing the adaptation and mitigation measures required for human and planetary health. Communication is a solution, and we need to incorporate it that way. This is a fun slide to show because the Atlantic did this profile on one of our TV meteorologists at the time, Shel Winkley. He's in Bryan College Station. And first of all, he's just a great guy and he's super fun. And two, just over the past year, he applied for a job and he works with us now in this program. So we get Shel every day. So we're super happy about that, but it's a really great article. And here's just a snapshot of some of the work this group is doing in some fun ways. So on the top left, you see an AMS broadcast conference. On the bottom left there, this is a global group that we work with. It's more project-based than full program-based, but it's TV weather presenters or communicators around the world. And we're loosely organized through a WhatsApp group, but there is a yearly convening. And sometimes there's a handful of us that go to COP able to support this group. And you see, just show your stripes, having a really fun time, opening climate conversations in ways that each of them approached for their community. For those who don't know Show Your Stripes, let me just bring us all together on that too. I do have a graphic later, but each stripe in that design that you see is a global temperature anomaly. And so we've made these stripes available in all cities and states and oceans and a lot of fun things and equipped them. I mean, they started buying stuff that, water bottles and mugs and everything you see there, ties, and using that as part of their conversation starters. And then this group we did on the bottom right there, this was an extreme heat workshop that was through the NSF up in Columbia. And several of you might have even been there. But again, how to bring the communication piece into extreme weather to help keep people safe and prepared. And that's really, truly the goal here. So a few milestones along the way. The pilot was in 2010, launched the program full-time in 2012. And by launching it full-time, we mean we went from a handful of segments to weekly production, which is a big jump in the workflow, and then started Spanish translation in 2014. So everything we do is in English and in Spanish. And John Morales is our dear friend, does that. We contract with him for all the Spanish translation. So everything we have on our site is in Spanish, if that's helpful for you. We were able to go a little more global with the weather presenters at COP21 and leading up to that. And then Climate Matters in the Newsroom was another NSF grant that we got to expand this same work to journalists at large. So we work with journalists across the board. Again, at the national level, but we love working with local because this is really how you experience it and how you can have that different conversation with people in a community. Then after that, Weather Power, Climate Shift Index, these are some of the tools we've been able to release to help support additional communication. And weather power is one where it's a wind and solar forecast for your community, because it's also weather. And then the climate shift index for those who don't follow attribution science as much. So our weather attribution, we help start that, and they are just absolutely rocking it. And we've been able to offset that and become their partner with daily attribution that we've been doing at Climate Central here. And one of those tools is the climate shift index. And I'll show you a visual from that, but it shows how we can quantify the role of climate change within temperatures around the globe every single day, everywhere. So it is really fascinating science. It could be a whole nother talk we could do. So how have we approached it? Well, we've approached climate matters in this way. It's always science first and foremost. And as I said, Claudia has been my North Star on this, especially when I came over to Climate Central. I was not as steeped in climate science as I was in really the weather side of science. And so I was able to get some real guidance in that process. Localize data whenever possible. Again, it's a global issue, but people feel things locally and they experience things personally. Make it simple and clear. If we can't effectively break a subject down internally in our office, we don't put it out, because this is something that we focus on all the time, is how to translate this into words that general people could understand. So if we're getting stuck, it's just not gonna resonate and land the same way. So that's really a gut check for us in the process. We operate on a news cycle. We produce at least weekly, and also a lot of rapid response around extreme events, and produce content in multiple formats in English and Spanish so that people can use it in various different forms of communication. And we've always approached it from these three buckets. We've got education, and really in the beginning, a lot of time listening to. We view this as a partnership with our network. This is not us telling them what to do, but listening to them. Where are they getting stuck? What questions do they have about the science? What are they trying to apply that they don't fully understand? So education over the years has been from very basic climate 101s all the way up to diving deep into a specific subject. And in the beginning, there were serious questions about the difference in weather and climate models, or where to trust data and gaps in data and to what level, right? So we had to deal with a lot of that in the beginning. Then we have the content, the weekly production that we put out, in addition to a lot of other resources from Climate Central by this point. So there's a lot of stuff to help those climate conversations and storytelling. And then the network support. Often people get stuck somewhere. Even the smartest of people who know the science may say, am I explaining it right? Does this make sense? I mean, we have people come to us, could I get connected with a Spanish speaking drought expert to go on Telemundo, right? So it's that support system and that network that really drives the confidence for communication. It's not intentionally people not wanting to include climate change. It's sometimes them being afraid and not knowing where and how. And since we've become their trusted messenger in this process, we can help guide that. Now, what we've learned: everyone can be a climate communicator. All of you can be a climate communicator. Know your audience. We have already tapped into that. Consider topic, tone, timing. For example, we're not going to put out a heat report in January unless it's just really hot in January, and it shouldn't be. But you know what I mean. Our snow reports and our winter reports are more during the winter. We try to connect on existing news hooks that are in the world, or cultural events that are happening already, and give that climate context to it, and then drive deeper into some bigger topics too. Meeting people where they are. We so often, and for really obvious reasons, especially right now, focus on what divides us, because it can be hard, but there's so much more that connects us, and there's so many shared values that we have. I'm a mom. I care about people's health. I care about my community. I love sports. I like to eat. I like beer, coffee, and wine. All of these things have a climate connection, or things that I can authentically talk about to many people. And of course, the weather. Personalize, localize. Again, you guys are at the forefront of understanding science. And thank goodness you are, because we need you. But most people are not there, and they're not going to understand. So how do we break that down, localize it, personalize it, and why it matters in someone else's community? And I'm going to combine that with the next one here: simplify and drop the jargon, because that's when you lose people. And it's different how you're communicating, right? Like, I don't see all of your faces right now, but if you're having a one-on-one conversation, you can see when someone glazes over, and then you have to bring them back. Because if you go too much with jargon, or if you go too deep into an area that it's just not their language, they're going to tune out. So you need to bring them back in. So simplify, drop that jargon, and meet people where they are. Tell a story when and how you can. Stories take us on these really amazing trips. They open our minds, they open our hearts in different ways. And this is the biggest one. Do not be afraid. Do not overthink it. You have science and public opinion on your side. So resources, you can start today. Everyone can start today. I'm going to take you through sort of a greatest hits of Climate Central, just to give you a sense of how we approach everything from explainers, big topics, localizing it. There's a definite focus on extreme weather in a lot of what we do, but we hit so many other things too. So this is just a sampling of some of the things you'll see. All of them are bookmarked on our website under the resources tab. I'm also going to give you a QR code so you can sign up to receive our weekly Climate Matters, because every week we send out one of these packages on a relevant, timely topic. So the greenhouse effect, this is when I start so many talks with anymore, even for groups that understand climate change, because again, you guys get this, but if you ask the public what the cause of climate change is, you often still get the ozone hole. So people have this gap in their climate IQ, and little pieces of information can help build that climate IQ and build the foundation of their understanding to take them further along. Just helping them understand that the reason we know the climate is changing is because of greenhouse gases, a science from the 1800s that is not challenged, that creates this blanket that traps heat, and we're adding more of it, that we know where they're coming from and we can measure them. That right there, a lot of society doesn't know, and it goes a long way. Here are the warming stripes. This is a great way to start a conversation. If you're lucky enough, you can put it on gear, wear it around. Every June, we have a Show Your Stripes Day. Join in. Many of you probably already know that, but I always like to open it up for those who might not know too. The reason June was selected, we worked with Ed Hawkins on this, and Ed Hawkins was the creator of this, excuse me, and he's over in the UK. Brilliant mind to come up with some of these ideas. And the reason we chose June 21st was it's the summer solstice and the kickoff of the season of the biggest extremes in the northern hemisphere. I know that that's not always the case in the southern hemisphere, but it was a good prompt to get people talking about climate change. Another way of looking things, the 1.5 that just floats around and people say, what does that even mean? This is a way that we sort of put that in context. Now, for most of our network, it's in the US, so we go Fahrenheit. The only time we often go Celsius is if it's global or if it's connected with the Paris Agreement. And in this case, last year, we hit that 1.5 for 1 year, as we know, not on the long-term average yet, but wanted to show that context. This one's one that's one of my favorites, the shifting bell curve. And since I have a lot of scientists here, I don't have to explain bell curves to you, which is great. But that simple, hey, what's a degree mean? Because you get that question a lot. Well, it shows you that that small shift in an average puts you in a whole new climate zone. You still get blue there. But look how much more orange and red. And that can help give people context if you're explaining something. Then we always try to localize whenever we can, scientifically and with our own resources. So these are some ways we've taken on heat. You know, trends in 110-degree days in Phoenix. Now, obviously, when we did a hot day, Phoenix, the threshold temperature is going to be very different than San Francisco. So we do that in our work. And when we do localize this, we do it for 240 cities across the US. More risky humid heat records. And again, this was a Claudia-inspired one, and it was kind of funny. I'll show you on the next graphic. We have a records tracker that was something we wanted to build for a long time and finally made it a reality recently. But the concept that, yeah, you're going to get some record cold, but the reason it's big news because it just doesn't happen much anymore, but we get a lot of record hot. And then this was on the bottom right, our response to the polar vortex a few years ago. Yeah, it's cold. No one's saying it's not cold, but it's just not as cold as it used to be. Another way of looking at this going forward, we called this one shifting cities, and take an average summer temperature projected out to 2100 and show you a step scale there of what that's going to feel like. You could do some fun cultural things around this too. Here is the records tracker, and this is inspired by Claudia and some of her research, but this is a tool you can go to. We built it out on Observable, and it tracks local records around the US for each one of those dots. Now, there's a little dated, this one that you're seeing here, that screenshot, but we were just going into it this morning again because it's been so hot. I'm going to say hot across the Northeast. I mean, I was at the Phillies game on Saturday and I was sweating. And it's October, so that's just not normal, right? So you can go into the records tracker, and we were seeing records over the past few days from the desert Southwest. It hit 91 in Minneapolis, all the way up to 80s across the Northeast. So there was a lot of record heat recently. Taking another topic, like the amount of moisture that's in the air, a good overview explainer about how warmer air leads to more evaporation, and we really do live on a water planet, because sometimes people who don't live near a coast forget that, right? They just need that context. And then when there's a trigger, that can lead to more precipitation. This is the NCA graphic. Many of you have probably seen. It's a great breakdown of how even places that are getting drier overall are still, when they experience their rain, their distribution is changing. So they're getting more heavy rain events when they do get rain. And then we were able to break that down even further on a local level here. And these were looking at hourly rainfall intensities. These are the events, as we all know, where they start to overwhelm a system. General trends in rainfall, or even the rainiest of days, are all different ways to look at this. But this is when we see mass flooding, when we see casualties, and you see a lot of trauma out of events like this and a lot of damage. So we were able to take a look at it this way too. Another explainer, drought, right? And there's a lot of interesting research that's come out of how it used to be the meteorological conditions, but now this extra heat is just intensifying our droughts. So we were able to put this explainer together. And then we've done some analysis on fire weather days. So these are not the fire days specifically, but the atmospheric conditions, not soil, the atmospheric conditions that could lead to an increase in fire, or what could be supported. And it gets down to hourly data, looking at relative humidity, or a version of moisture in the air. I get fired up about relative humidity sometimes. I wish we didn't introduce that to society. I wish we introduced dew point. Temperature, and also wind, and how they all come together. Ocean, another way of looking at this, is another tool that we've been able to put together. This updates regularly on their observable. So again, if you go to our website, you can get this stuff, that we've just been pushing these record levels, and it's just extraordinary. It's not okay for our oceans. This is a graphic many of you have probably seen. It's an old IPCC, but the first time I saw it, it really stood out to me of just how much was going into the oceans and this perspective. So we were able to do this. We actually even have an animation that kind of shows you all of this, but even all the stuff that we're seeing happening with just less than 10% going into our atmosphere and over 90% going into our oceans. So it's a good way to give that perspective if you want to get into specifics on something. Here's another explainer one of really trying to help connect, when you have a warmer ocean, what that can mean for hurricanes, all tropical cyclones in general, right? And then we have another really great tool at Climate Central that is a sea level rise risk mapping and visualization tool that looks at data in so many different ways of where the water is going to go, by what year, what's going to be underneath that water. And so you can explore. And I know many of you are in a coastal location, so this is critical. For those who aren't in coastal, it's just not as important. But when you are coastal, this is really critical. And another way we've been playing around with this is what we call flood vision. And this is an EV down the bottom left. We actually got that truck. We built the stuff that's on top of it. Now, I did not. So I can't get into too many specifics on that. But we drove that truck along the edge line of America and mapped it. And we're able to, through AI, we're creating this process where you can visualize where the water is going to go at different levels. So here's just an example. When you put on the water, and eventually this is going to be toggleable and looking at different areas and what will be underwater, but look at this, right? It's another interesting resource to help make decisions for communities, or to help people understand what this actually looks like, because it's hard sometimes to process. Oh, 4 feet of water, what does that mean, right? So this can help people visualize that. As I was explaining with attribution science, this is the climate shift index that we put together. Again, global temps every day, everywhere. And this is a snapshot from today. And you see that climate change, when you start to get into those yellows and reds, that there is a climate fingerprint in the temperatures we're experiencing. And you see that across the northeastern part of the United States, all the way down through the south. We also applied this to oceans, and the scale is extraordinarily higher because of the fact that there's so much more warming in the oceans. And what's really fascinating with this too is we've been able to apply this, and oops, that was the old one. And sorry, I'm actually going to get out for a minute because I want to show you this here, because I'm accidentally put this over this here. But I wanted to show you this in how we've been able to apply this to a specific storm. So we got the Ocean CSI up and running last summer. And again, it's all peer-reviewed science. It's on our website if you want to explore deeper. But Hurricane Helene was going over ocean water that was made 300 to 500 times more likely because of climate change, where it had its explosive rapid intensification. And so that's just one way of looking at this. We also have a tropical cyclone CSI that's getting up and running this year. We haven't fortunately had as many storms to explore that with to show you, but this was really noteworthy. And the other thing I'd say too is from the communication side, why this is critical. So just connecting all these dots is so many people still ask, is there a climate connection? Is there a climate connection? And people are afraid sometimes to make that connection. But this is able to insert climate into the conversation before the storm even makes landfall. So it's a confidence builder in communication in a whole wide range of ways. So why does this matter, right? I'm going to take you through a few ways of how we've applied why this matters. One of the reasons I pulled out the billion-dollar disasters, I think we've all heard that sadly this data set was shut down by the government, but we're bringing it back and it's coming back this month. We've been fortunate enough to hire Adam Smith, and he is the one that really ran all of this research and data down at NOAA. And so he's working with us now. And so this is coming back this year, very soon too. Another way we looked at it, again, just playing around with numbers can tell a whole different story. The time between disasters. And Jen Brady on our team did this analysis. It was one of my favorites. And she laughs because she goes, burn. It was a number divided by a number. It really wasn't hard. So this is just another way of looking at it, though, and telling a different story. When we look at communities and our ability to recover and prepare, and our system as a whole just being so stressed because we're having so many more disasters and so much less time in between to prepare and recover. It's affecting our health in really big ways. This is another huge way to get into a conversation starter, because everyone, I shouldn't say everyone right now, but the vast majority of people care about health. And these are some different ways from big and small to get into it, right? Like poison ivy. I mean, it loves CO2. Also, more mosquitoes. It was just up at Climate Week and we were at a dinner and there was a door open. One of the guys next to me was like, I think that I just got bit by a mosquito. I go, well, let me show you how we're getting more mosquito days. So you can get into it that way. Also, allergies. The season is getting longer. We're seeing new allergens move in. And with wildfire smoke, it's not just on the West Coast anymore. It's everywhere. So again, these are just some ways. I know all of you know this stuff, but these are ways to introduce this or get into a conversation or get into a form of communication on your social media, in digital media, in the hallways, however it makes the most sense for you. Back to school cooling demand. I mean, we're seeing this big time right now. My brother, some good friends of mine are teachers in Philly, and they're having some serious problems with cooling right now because it's been so warm. Power outages are on the rise. Beer, coffee, wine, all being impacted. And our sports teams, go Phils, hopefully tonight they do it. We are also seeing this as a solution. As I said, wind and solar are part of the solution. The power of trees, the beautiful nature they bring to us, and that's just healing overall, but how that also applies to storm runoff, air pollution, carbon pollution removed, all of that. And this is just a quick snapshot because sadly, climate change is affecting everything. So all of these are points of entry into a conversation or a form of communication. So we're running low on time here. I just want to show this again. Everyone can be a climate communicator. Know your audience, meet people where they are, personalize, localize, simplify, tell a story, and don't be afraid. Communication really is a climate solution, and one that we have not truly unlocked, and it's one that every single person can leave here today and take on. So this is our atmosphere. This is what gives us life on this planet as we know. In the future, where we go is really our choice. So here is the QR code if you want to sign up and start receiving Climate Matters, or if you want to go to our website and explore the resources, go ahead, climatecentral.org, and start to look around for different topics and ideas, and they could be points of entry for conversation or communication. So that is what I have got today.